welcome to Vantage This Week, a show where we recap the highlights of the week gone by. The war in Gaza resumed this week. Israel conducted surprise airstrikes on the enclave and more than 400 people lost their lives. Israel blames Hamas for the resumption of the fighting because the group refuses to release the remaining hostages. Meanwhile, bombs rained down on Yemen as well as the US resumed attacks on the Houthis. The Houthis began attacking ships again and Donald Trump wanted to make them pay. Speaking of payback, Europeans are angry at Trump because of his tariffs. So many are now pushing back by boycotting American goods. And two astronauts finally came home this week, Sunita Williams and Barry Wilmore. They were supposed to be in space for 8 days, but they got stuck for 9 months. Now they're finally back on Earth. All this and more lined up. Let's get started. Our lead story today is from Gaza. After almost 2 months of relative peace, the ceasefire has been shattered. Israel launched surprise airstrikes last night at about 2 a.m. local time. More than 400 people have been killed all over the Gaza Strip. 400 people. I should warn you, the visuals coming in are not for the faint of heart.
Almost the entire family was martyred, all of them in pieces, and our house collapsed on us. Our house is directly next to theirs. There are also injuries at the Satari house. They are still pulling people out from under the rubble. We were sleeping just before Sahur, and the house almost fell on us.
The strikes took place in Gaza City, northern Gaza, Deir al-Bala, Khan Yunis and Rafah. Reports say tanks fired shells into Rafah as well. The Israeli military says it was targeting Hamas officials. At least 5 senior members of Hamas have been killed. This includes the head of Hamas's government in Gaza, and Israel says this is just the beginning. The Israeli military has told people to evacuate parts of Gaza. This could signal the beginning of a new ground operation. It seems Gaza is going back to the situation before January 19th, before the ceasefire was implemented. And Israel has put the blame squarely on Hamas. It's because Hamas is not releasing the remaining Israeli hostages.
The Israeli Air Force initiated a series of attacks against Hamas targets in Gaza. We will show no mercy on our enemies. Let me be very clear. Israel will not stop until all of our hostages are back home. We will make it very clear to the Security Council that if they want to stop the war in Gaza, they have to ensure that the hostages are coming back to Israel. We are committed to bring them back.
As you know, a ceasefire took effect on the 19th of January this year. It was supposed to be implemented in 3 phases. The first phase was to see the halt in fighting. They were supposed to stop the fighting. For the most part, it did happen. About 2,000 Palestinian prisoners were also released from Israeli jails. In exchange, Hamas released hostages, 33 Israelis and 5 Thai nationals. Some hostage bodies were also returned. These were the terms of Phase 1. And this Phase 1, ended on the 1st of March. But here's the problem. Hamas still holds Israeli hostages. About 60 Israeli hostages are still in Gaza. And these are all men of fighting age. It is not clear how many of them are still alive, but they're still in Gaza. They were supposed to be released in the second phase of the ceasefire. And those talks have been on for weeks. But the two sides could not agree to the terms of Phase 2. According to the original ceasefire proposal, Israel was supposed to pull its troops out of Gaza in Phase 2, but Israel is not ready for that. It wants to keep its troops in place. And it wants the remaining Israeli hostages to be returned. So there's been a stalemate. Negotiations have been stalled. Meanwhile, Israel has been putting pressure on Hamas to extend Phase 1. Earlier this month, it blocked food and other aid to the enclave. Then it stopped electricity flowing into Gaza. These are all ways to build pressure, of course, in the hopes of getting Hamas to cave and releasing the remaining hostages. And what's the response from Hamas? Well, they made a statement on Friday saying that they would release an Israeli-American dual national. In return, they want an extension of the ceasefire. And the US condemned this public statement. Washington said Hamas was just playing games, that publicly Hamas was claiming flexibility, but in private it was making impractical demands. Then the US issued a warning. It told Hamas that time was ticking. Israel approached the US ahead of today's strikes. The White House was consulted, and it seems US President Donald Trump gave Israel the go-ahead for today. So Washington is on board. Israel is attacking Hamas again, and the ceasefire looks like history. We'll be tracking this story as it develops. You put out one fire, another one breaks out. That's the situation in West Asia. Things had just started to stabilize in Gaza and Lebanon, but there's a new flashpoint in Yemen. It's the Houthis versus the United States. On Saturday, President Donald Trump announced a military operation. He accused the Houthis of piracy and terrorism. The Houthis, as you would know, are an armed group in Yemen. They are funded and backed by Iran. They control Yemen's capital, Sana'a, and the northwest. Now, Trump had a direct message for them. If your attacks do not stop, hell will rain down upon you. That's what he told the Houthis. Later that day, he did exactly that. The US launched airstrikes on Houthi targets. They mainly hit the capital Sana'a and the Houthi stronghold of Sada. The US military posted videos of the attack. Take a look at this. Trump and his officials were monitoring the strikes. The White House later published some pictures. They showed Trump in his typical golfing attire, white t-shirt and a red MAGA hat. Over in Yemen, the toll is massive. Houthi officials say at least 53 people have been killed, which includes 5 children. They say the US hit residential areas in Yemen, and the videos show the true extent of the damage. You can see mangled beams, blocks of broken concrete, and buildings reduced to rubble. Take a look at this now. Many people are still missing. Search operations are underway in Sana'a and Sada. The goal is to rescue people trapped under the rubble. But right now, time is running out for them, and the US is not done yet. Their military says this operation will continue. The first round of strikes was on Saturday, and the second was this morning. Trump's national security advisor claimed multiple Houthi leaders had been taken out. He says the attacks are meant to be overwhelming.
The difference is these were not kind of pinprick, back and forth, what ultimately proved to be feckless attacks. This was an overwhelming response that actually targeted multiple Houthi leaders and took them out. And the difference here is, one, going after the Houthi leadership, and two, holding Iran responsible.
So the US is not interested in restraint. They want to drive fear into the hearts of the Houthis, which raises 2 questions. Why now, and will it work? You see, since 2023, the Houthis have been attacking ships in the Red Sea. First, they targeted only Israeli ships, but eventually other vessels were also hit. Their goal was to put pressure on Israel to make them stop the war in Gaza. When the war ended, so did the Houthi attacks. Then earlier this month, something changed. Israel cut off humanitarian aid to Gaza, so the Houthis asked Israel to lift the aid embargo. If not, they threatened to resume the attacks. Days after that, Trump ordered the strikes, which brings us to the second question: is it even working? In public, the Houthis are defiant. They claim to have attacked US warships in the Red Sea, specifically the Truman aircraft carrier. The Houthis say they will meet escalation with escalation.
Now we will meet escalation with escalation. We will respond to the American enemy in its raids, its attacks with missile strikes, by targeting its aircraft carriers, its warships, its ships. It will be included in the ban, and yet we still have escalatory options. If it continues its aggression, we will move to additional escalatory options, God willing.
The Houthis did fire 11 drones at the Truman, but the US claims that all of them were shot down. Now, if this conflict continues, it would lead to major changes. For starters, it will weaken Iran further. Their proxies have been crippled in the last 2 years. First it was Hamas in Gaza, then it was Hezbollah in Lebanon. If you add Bashar al-Assad's ouster in Syria, it's been setback after setback for Iran. The Houthis had largely escaped this onslaught. But Trump has set his sight on them. It's the perfect chance to weaken another Iranian proxy. And how is Iran responding to this? As always, they've distanced themselves from the Houthis.
Ansar Allah, as representatives of the Yemenis, make their strategic and operational decisions on their own. The Islamic Republic of Iran plays no role in setting the national or operational policies of any faction of the resistance front, including Yemen.
A lot depends on Trump's goals. He says he wants to stop the Red Sea attacks, but no attacks have been reported since the Gaza ceasefire. Plus, the US is acting alone here. Former President Joe Biden had also launched strikes on Yemen, but those were joint operations. Britain and France joined the American strikes under Biden. But this time, the US has acted alone. All of this makes you wonder, what is Trump's end goal? Does he want to deter the Houthis or wipe them out? The answer could reshape West Asia's immediate future. Now let's talk about Elon Musk's Tesla, the electric car company. Over the past few weeks, it has fallen victim to a range of attacks with Molotov cocktails aimed at Tesla showrooms and cyber trucks being set ablaze. These attacks are happening across the US, Canada and Europe. They're part of the Tesla takedown protests. Now, full points for alliteration, but Donald Trump is not so happy with the way things are playing out. He is taking Tesla attacks in the US very seriously, and his administration is calling them acts of domestic terrorism. So what's behind this anger against Tesla? Here's a report.
In Colorado, Molotov cocktails thrown at Tesla cars and the word Nazi spray painted on Tesla dealership buildings. In South Carolina, fire set to Tesla charging stations. In Oregon, Molotov cocktails thrown at a Tesla store and more than a dozen bullets fired at another showroom. In Seattle, Cybertruck set on fire. And now in Las Vegas, several Tesla vehicles shot at and set ablaze. The word resist was painted in red on the store's doors. Different places, different kinds of attacks, but one common link. Attacks on property carrying the logo of Tesla are cropping up across the United States, be it on showrooms, vehicle lots or charging stations. So far, no injuries have been reported, and in some cases like Colorado and South Carolina, people have been charged. But let's state the obvious. These attacks are not about Tesla vehicles, no matter how oddly shaped they come. These attacks aren't about the electric car company either. It's about the person who owns the said company. Elon Musk, the close advisor of US President Donald Trump and the leader of DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency. In recent weeks, There have been DOGE-driven cuts to the federal workforce and agencies. Public anger is bubbling. And now there are #Tesla takedown protests. Those who aren't lighting Teslas on fire are putting up cheeky stickers on their own Teslas saying, "I bought this before we knew Elon was crazy." Those who can't afford a Tesla are posting on social media or taking to the streets.
I decided that I wanted to join the protest here and send a message to Elon Musk in a way that I think is very direct. We could adversely impact sales and inflict financial pain on him, similar to the financial pain that he's inflicting on our veterans, our seniors, and a lot of less fortunate people in the U.S., along with our federal workers.
So now the US government is cracking the whip. The FBI is investigating attacks targeting Tesla vehicles. Not as acts of vandalism, no. They are investigating Tesla desecration as a potential act of terrorism. Attorney General Pam Bondi has released a statement. She calls these attacks nothing short of domestic terrorism. You heard that right. The Trump administration is expanding the definition of domestic terrorism for the great genius Elon Musk. Now it will include spray paint on electric vehicles, which is kind of ironic considering that President Trump issued mass pardons for more than 1,000 January 6th rioters who stormed the Capitol building. But moving past that, in a recent interview, Trump has said that the attackers are paid by people who are very highly political on the left. Meanwhile, Bondi has promised to impose severe consequences on those involved in these attacks, including those operating behind the scenes to coordinate and fund these crimes. Speaking of funding, these protests are mostly against Musk's powerful but dubious role in cutting the size of the US government so that the Trump administration can call vandalism terrorism. But by the looks of it, the anger is here to stay. And not just in the United States, there have been peaceful protests outside Tesla dealerships in Europe as well. The UK, Germany and Portugal, also in Canada. There have been some not-so-peaceful attacks as well. Earlier this month, a dozen Teslas were torched in France. This week, 4 Teslas were burnt to a crisp in Germany. And the damage isn't just physical. Tesla is bleeding cash. The company's stock doubled in value soon after Trump's election. But since then, it has shed all those gains. The stock is down more than 30%. In Europe, sales are down 45%. It seems that during Trump's first term, his properties in New York and Washington were the obvious places for protest. But in his second term, Tesla is filling that gap.
In Pakistan, the hunter has become the hunted. For decades, Islamabad sponsored terrorism in the region, but now they're at the receiving end. The only downside, innocent Pakistanis are paying the price for it. And the generals, still lounging in comfort. Last week, an entire train was hijacked in Balochistan. The attack was planned by the BLA, the Baloch Liberation Army, which is a separatist group in the region. On Sunday, they struck again. The BLA targeted a military convoy in the district of Noshki. They drove a truck full of bombs into the convoy. Take a look at this. The BLA claims 90 Pakistani soldiers were killed, but the official death toll is 5, plus 30 soldiers injured. This was again a daring attack by the Baloch Liberation Army, and their target remained the same, Pakistan's military. Both these attacks show a level of complexity. The BLA chose risky targets, they made videos of the attacks, and they made sure to target the military. Even the hijacked train was carrying dozens of military personnel. So how is the army responding? Well, right now they seem to be in a state of shock. Clearly, the generals did not anticipate this. Tomorrow, they're expected to brief Pakistani lawmakers. After that, the parliament will hold a closed-door session. All signals point to a crackdown. But even that may not help, because Pakistan's problem is more complicated. They're not dealing with one group. They are dealing with multiple groups, like the BLA in Balochistan and the Pakistani Taliban or the TTP in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Different groups, different tactics, different ideologies, but the same enemy, Pakistan's military. These groups have become emboldened since 2021. That's when the Afghan Taliban took power in Kabul. They have been giving shelter and weapons to these groups. Sound familiar, doesn't it? A rogue regime supporting terrorists against a neighbor. It's what Pakistan does to India. But right now, Afghanistan is doing it to them. In fact, I'll show you some numbers. In 2021, 403 terror attacks were reported in Pakistan. 403. In 2022, that number rose to 512. In 2023, it was 789. And last year, 1,116. These numbers make one thing quite clear. Pakistan is facing a major security crisis. This is the highest level of violence in almost 10 years, and Islamabad is blaming its neighbors for it, both India and Afghanistan.
जो बलूचिस्तान में ये जो वाक़या है और इससे पहले जो दहशतगर्दी के वाक़यात हैं, वी अंडरस्टैंड कि इसका जो मेन स्पॉन्सर है योर ईस्टर्न नेबर. दिस इज येट अनदर इंसिडेंट ऑफ टेररिज्म जिसकी जो लिंकेजेस हैं वो हमें अपने पड़ोसी मुल्क जो साथ अफगानिस्तान है वहां पे मिल रही हैं. और इट इज ए पार्ट ऑफ ए प्रोसेस दैट इज गोइंग ऑन.
Beyond the blame game, what's the playbook? Pakistan adopted a strategy in 2014. It is called the NAP, the National Action Plan. Think of it as Pakistan's anti-terror playbook. It combines crackdowns with non-military measures, like reforms and development programs. But this playbook has had 3 problems. Problem number 1 is the lack of global support. Pakistan has been complaining about terrorism at the United Nations, but no one is paying attention to them. And why should they? Why would they? Islamabad played a double game on terrorism. They betrayed the Americans once. So why should they trust Pakistan again? The second problem is the selective approach. Pakistan may oppose the TTP or Baloch insurgents, but they still sponsor terrorism against India. They still have good and bad terrorists. As long as that does not change, Pakistan will not make progress. And finally, problem number 3, the economy is still in the dumps. I mentioned non-military measures in the anti-terrorism plan. Measures like giving jobs to young people, building critical public infrastructure, and ensuring overall prosperity. Pakistan has not been able to do that, but frankly, none of this should surprise anyone. Pakistan created a radicalization factory. What else would it produce except terrorists? Now let's turn to Canada. Its diplomats cannot catch a break. Canada could be headed for a snap election. The new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, could call for it in April. Now, with this election looming, Canada's foreign ministry is jumping from one crisis to another. Their ties with India are already strained thanks to their former Prime Minister, and now their relationship with China has taken another hit. Earlier this year, China executed 4 Canadian nationals. China executed 4 Canadian nationals. They were convicted of drug-related crimes. All of them held dual citizenship. They were both Canadian and Chinese. But China does not recognize dual nationality, so it insists that these executions are an internal matter. What's worse, the executions happened months ago, but Ottawa just found out about them. Here's a report.
Canada's relations with China have hit a new low. Earlier this year, China executed 4 Canadians. They were convicted on drug crimes, and Ottawa just found out about this. But that's not the most shocking detail. China claims that they were never Canadian to begin with.
Combating drug-related crimes is a shared responsibility of all countries. China is a country governed by the rule of law and treats defendants of all nationalities equally. The Canadian side should respect the spirit of the rule of law and stop interfering in China's judicial sovereignty.
They were dual nationals, citizens of both China and Canada. Canada's Foreign Minister, Melanie Joly, has spoken. She has been tracking the cases for months. She had tried to intervene alongside other officials. Even former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau made an attempt. But they couldn't stop the executions, because Beijing doesn't recognize dual nationality. Canada has condemned the deaths, but it's falling on deaf ears. The identities of these 4 individuals have been withheld. There's one more Canadian on death row in China. His name is Robert Schellenberg. Again, he's a Canadian sentenced for drug smuggling. Ottawa has appealed to Beijing for clemency, just like it did in the previous cases. But Canada has failed to move the needle with China. The impasse sums up the state of Canada-China ties. The relationship has been tense for years now. It hit a low point in 2018, when Ottawa arrested a former Huawei executive. Her name is Meng Wanzhou. She's the daughter of the founder of Huawei, Ren Zhengfei. Meng was charged with fraud by the US. Back then, Beijing had retaliated by jailing 2 Canadians. In 2021, there was a breakthrough when Meng was released after a deal with US authorities, but ties haven't improved since then. Canada and China are locked in a trade war now. Ottawa has raised duties on a range of Chinese goods, from food and farm produce to Chinese steel and aluminium, and even electric vehicles. China has hit back with equal force. These executions could be a message from Beijing, and a strong one, that China has no intention of mending its ties with Canada.
Let's turn to India now, where Prime Minister Narendra Modi is riding the podcast wave. The first one came out in January, the second one yesterday. Prime Minister Modi sat down with American podcaster Lex Friedman. He discussed life, religion, politics and history. We are bringing you the top 6 highlights. Number 1, Modi says Trump is more prepared this time. He says Trump stands for America first and he stands for India first, which is why both leaders get along so well.
I have observed President Trump both during his first term and now in his second run. This time, he seems far more prepared than before. He has a clear roadmap in his mind, with well-defined steps, each one designed to lead him toward his goals.
Modi also praised Trump for his courage, especially after the assassination attempts last year. Next is highlight number 2. Prime Minister Modi wants a reset with China. He pointed to both historical and contemporary equations.
If we look back centuries, there's no real history of conflict between us. Of course, differences are natural, but our focus is to ensure that these differences don't turn into disputes. Since the 21st century is Asia's century, we want India and China to compete in a healthy and natural way.
That's a clear commitment from Modi. He wants a healthy relationship with China. It also shows how the tone has softened. Just last year, India was slamming China for violating agreements and renaming sites, but now the approach is more positive. Even China's foreign ministry has noticed this. They have welcomed Prime Minister Modi's remarks. Next is highlight number 3. Prime Minister Modi is hopeful of a peace deal in Ukraine. He says he told Putin that this is not the time for war. And he told Zelensky the resolution will only come at the talking table. Modi is basically telling Ukraine to wake up and smell the coffee.
Regardless of how many people stand with you in the world, there will never be a resolution on the battlefield. Ukraine may hold countless discussions with their allies, but it will bear no fruit.
A pretty clear message to Zelensky here. don't think your allies will help you out. Sit down with President Putin and talk things out. The Prime Minister also referred to Trump's change in position. He says it creates an opportunity for meaningful and productive talks. Highlight number 4, criticism of global institutions.
Organizations like the United Nations came into being after the First World War. But they failed to evolve with the times. And this inability to adapt has sparked a global debate on their relevance.
The timing of this criticism is key. Political bodies like the United Nations have failed to stop conflicts. Trade bodies like the World Trade Organization have failed to stop tariff wars. So their relevance is indeed under question. It is also why India is pushing for reforms. And next is highlight number 5, Pakistan and terrorism. Prime Minister Modi recalled his outreach in 2014 when he first took office. He invited then Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif to his swearing-in ceremony in 2014, but the warmth was not reciprocated. Modi says terrorism is deeply rooted in Pakistan, but he also said the people of Pakistan yearn for peace, that they are weary of the bloodshed. Highlight number 6 is artificial intelligence. We have been debating the question of whether AI can replace us. The Indian Prime Minister says it cannot.
I firmly believe that no technology can ever replace the boundless creativity and imagination of the human mind. Now look, humans have an innate ability to care for each other. The natural tendency to be concerned about one another. Now, can someone tell me, is AI capable of this?
A strong vote for human creativity, which brings us to the final highlight, Elon Musk and Doge. Every country is now debating the idea of cost-cutting. Indian Prime Minister Modi is also in favor of it. He says the Doge mission makes him happy. He also drew parallels to India, things like ghost names in a pension scheme or benefits being given to people who were not eligible for them, like a widow pension before marriage. So put together, this conversation was around 3 hours and 17 minutes. It was basically a window to Prime Minister Modi's worldview about diplomacy, about conflict resolution, about global institutions and about the changing world order. The PM rarely goes into such detail about these issues, but this time he did. And in the process, he gave a glimpse into Modi, the statesman. He's completed almost 11 years in office. He's one of the most experienced world leaders going around. And clearly, he's keen to take up that extra responsibility. We've seen Modi, the politician, and Modi, the Prime Minister. This time, we saw Modi, the statesman. How Europe is scared, but many in the continent are also angry. I'm talking about ordinary people, your average Joe, or I suppose your average Johan. Either way, ordinary Europeans are angry, and not just at Russia, but increasingly also at America. And this is thanks to US President Donald Trump. Trump's stance on Ukraine has upset some Europeans. They feel it's a betrayal of Western values to support Putin over Zelensky. And that's one reason for the anger, but perhaps the bigger reason is Trump's trade war. Donald Trump has threatened to impose tariffs on everyone. He has already done it to Canada and Mexico. He has tariffed steel and aluminium from everywhere, but things are about to get worse. New tariffs are set to arrive on the 2nd of April, and it's likely that no one will be spared, no matter how closely they're linked to the US. They will face American tariffs, and this has hurt the Europeans, who see the tariffs as a betrayal of the Western alliance. Ordinary people, of course, cannot influence geopolitics, not directly at least, but they can exercise the power of their wallets. An average person can still make their frustration felt by choosing to boycott American goods, and that's exactly what the Europeans seem to be doing. They're boycotting American brands or products made in the US, and leading the charge are the Nordic countries. Denmark, of course, right up front. The Danes are especially angry because of Trump's tariffs, his approach to Ukraine and Greenland. Greenland, as you would know, is an autonomous Danish territory, but Trump wants to take it over. This has angered ordinary Danish citizens, so they are finding ways to push back. Denmark's biggest supermarket chain is helping with the boycott. It has come up with a simple identification system, a black star on its price tags. The star means that a product is made in Europe. It's as simple as that. The supermarket still stocks American goods. They haven't been removed, but the star system makes boycotting US goods easier. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. You have new apps coming out allowing people to scan products and determine if they are European. Then there are online communities, Facebook groups with tens of thousands of members all discussing ways to boycott the US. And I know it is ironic, boycotting American goods on Facebook, which is an American social media giant. The groups know this too. But they say nothing else gives them as much reach. This is how the boycott movement is growing in Europe. It follows a similar movement in Canada.
There's an enormous Buy Canada, enormous Buy Local movement on the go. It's not a big marketing company coming up with an idea. It's grassroots, it's organic, it's from Canadians themselves, and that's what we have to grasp is how big this movement is. It's kind of swept across the country overnight by itself.
The movement seems to be sweeping across Europe as well, and it seems to have swept away one brand in particular, Tesla. These days, Tesla CEO Elon Musk is synonymous with Trump because he funded Trump's election campaign, and now he's a top advisor to the US president, so obviously Europeans are targeting Musk too. Tesla sales in Europe were down by 45% in January, 45% compared to a year ago. Europeans are switching to local alternatives, even if they're more expensive. And sometimes the anti-Tesla sentiment has turned violent. The cars have even been set on fire. All of this shows European anger. It would have been unthinkable just a few months ago, this level of anger against the United States of America. But this is the reality now, and things may get worse on April 2nd when the new batch of Trump tariffs come into effect. Let's talk about the ocean. It covers 70% of the Earth's surface, yet more than 80% of it remains unmapped and unexplored. Simply put, we know very little about the ocean. But a new discovery could upend what we do know. According to a recent study, lumpy metallic rocks in the deepest reaches of the ocean could be making oxygen. These are rocks in the darkest pits of the ocean. Sunlight does not reach these depths, but scientists say that this is where some rocks are producing oxygen, or what's being called dark oxygen. How is this possible, and what does this mean for us? Here is a report.
Oxygen is vital for life. About half the oxygen we breathe comes from the ocean. It is made by marine plants as they photosynthesize. As you already know, this process requires sunlight. But what if sunlight was not required to produce oxygen? This may sound bizarre, but it could be true, because scientists have discovered dark oxygen. According to a recent study, lumpy metallic rocks on the seafloor in the deepest, darkest reaches of the ocean could be making oxygen in the absence of sunlight. This claim upends everything we believe about the origins of life. According to the long-established view, life was made possible when organisms started producing oxygen via photosynthesis about 2.7 billion years ago. If this is not the cold, hard truth, if rocks can produce the so-called dark oxygen without sunlight, it calls into question the very origins of life. So how exactly is this happening? Scientists say that in the depths of the deep sea, where no sunlight can penetrate, oxygen appears to be produced by nodules. They are talking about naturally occurring potato-sized metallic nodules. These objects produce enough electrical currents to split seawater, basically H2O, into hydrogen and oxygen. You may remember that this process is called electrolysis. This is happening in the lightless abyss of the ocean and producing dark oxygen. And this is good news for mining companies. In recent years, they have appeared borderline obsessed with the deep sea. Several deep-sea mining companies have been eager to extract precious metals from the ocean bed. And these nodules are treasure for them because they can act like batteries. But this comes with many risks. Unacceptable ecological risks that could disrupt underwater life and have repercussions for the planet at large. But this isn't the only problem here. The new discovery has stirred a new debate. Some members of the scientific community have expressed their reservations about the finding. They say that the dark oxygen discovery was partly funded by a Canadian deep-sea mining company, which could bring the finding and its assumptions into question. That said, if dark oxygen exists and if lumpy rocks are producing it under the sea, then this discovery is one for the history books.
They set off to spend 8 days in space. Their trip lasted 9 months. But finally, they're back. NASA astronauts Sunita Williams and Barry Wilmore have finally arrived back on Earth. They made a fast re-entry through the Earth's orbit, followed by a gentle splashdown off the coast of Florida. They came out of the hatch, waving and smiling, bringing an end to a mission that has captivated global attention for months now. So what did they do in space for 9 whole months? How was their journey back? What lies ahead of them in terms of recovery? And how is the world reacting to their return? Our next report tells you.
The task get going, and you have.
Earth circled 4,576 times.
Good handle.
Distance traveled 195 million kilometers. Days spent in space 286. That's 278 days longer than anticipated. But finally, Sunita Williams and Barry Wilmore are no longer stuck in space. They have returned to Earth.
So right now what we're doing on board Dragon is preparing for that undocking sequence to be commanded.
Hitching a different ride home than the one they went up on. Their SpaceX capsule made a fast re-entry through the Earth's atmosphere. Then 4 parachutes opened and the astronauts splashed down in calm waters off the coast of Florida as a pod of dolphins circled the craft.
Screen we can see dolphins actually who want to come and play with Dragon. Now one of the fast boats there in place working.
A recovery ship lifted the capsule out of the water. And within an hour, the NASA astronauts were out of their capsule. They smiled and waved, bringing an end to a mission that was supposed to last 8 days, but went on for 9 months.
She, like her other crew members, now will be assisted onto the mobility aid.
The saga began last year in June. Williams and Wilmore took part in a space flight on the experimental Starliner, developed by the aerospace company Boeing. The capsule suffered technical problems. It was deemed too risky to take the astronauts home. So Starliner returned safely to Earth in September, empty.
3 out, currently reefing.
While the NASA pair had to stay back. They have only been able to return now, after being stuck in space for more than 9 months. The astronauts have regularly spoken about being comfortable with their situation. While they were up there, they carried out an array of experiments. They conducted spacewalks. In fact, Williams broke the record for the woman who spent the most hours outside a space station.
Number 2, the
team also played dress up for Christmas.
We have here with us to just prepare, which will be sort of fun.
But their journey has gripped global attention, and their return is being embraced. NASA officials have praised their resilience.
You know, the thing I think back of this whole time frame is how really resilient Butch and Sunny were the whole time. I mean, they launched on what was going to be a short test flight with the crew flight test vehicle with Boeing. And then they moved very quickly into station increment operations, and they became seamlessly part of the International Space Station. And they did that because they're experienced astronauts.
Meanwhile, people are celebrating the return, especially in Williams's Indian ancestral village.
बहुत ही खुशी है सर, पूरी रात जगे हुए, रात भी जगे, रात को भी हवन चली है और सुबह भी हवन करना है, कल भी भंडारा करना है.
So what happens next? The astronauts reunited with their loved ones and were quickly hustled away for medical checks. After all, space is tough on the human body.
That is none other than Sunny Williams.
when they come back to Earth, it's still a big difference going from that weightlessness to suddenly being under gravity again. So they have to adapt to that both physically and mentally. So they will be under direct medical supervision for a couple of weeks. Then they'll continue to do physiotherapy to make sure that they're getting back to normal as quickly as possible.
So the world has breathed a sigh of relief. The astronauts have returned home. But it will be a while before they readapt to living on Earth.
That is none other than Sunny Williams. Big smile, big.
Sunita Williams is back on Earth. The rumor is they forgot to bring back Butch Wilmore. Don't know who he is? Well, you're part of the problem. Williams and Wilmore went up to the space station last year. It was supposed to be an 8-day mission, but technical problems stranded them in space until yesterday. After 9 months, Sunita Williams and Wilmore returned to Earth. Time was the big issue here. A few more days and DOGE would have fired them to cut costs. Jokes aside, this is a story of resilience. Yes, they're both professionals. They have been trained for such situations. But what they did required mental fortitude and perseverance. And the internet is celebrating them with memes. Take a look. Do you think that Ukraine is at its weakest position?
This war is not about Ukraine.
Do you believe that your president was insulted? Yes or no question. Is Ukraine prepared to pay the price for that peace?
No compromises at the cost of territorial integrity and sovereignty.
Diplomacy will work?
Yes.
Do you think Russia will give up the territory if there is no ceasefire? Do you propose to keep fighting?
We are ready to resist.
Do you think there will be peace?
Many countries gave us 3 days.
President Trump said you don't have any cards.
We do not have another choice.
How do you keep fighting?
You ask me once again the same question.
Because you've not answered my question.
We have enough capacities to keep fighting.
Good afternoon, Prime Minister Lakshman.
Good afternoon.
Making headlines in India well before you landed here. New Delhi has raised concerns in the recent past vis-a-vis the Khalistani separatists that operate in New Zealand. How do you propose to address these concerns?
In our democracy, we believe in the freedom of speech.
Organizations like the Al-Qaeda or ISIS were to hold a referendum in New Zealand, something related to one of your Western partners. Would you say the same?
We have very well-defined laws in our democracy.
No specific conversation on Khalistan on this visit.
It was raised with me. I also raised back our position.
Are you willing to be open to these concerns from New Delhi?
As I keep coming back to you to say, we have strong laws in our system.